The abortion of the divine plan of a soul. The abortion of a soul is the abortion of her destiny and her divine plan. It is the abortion of an individual calling from God. For our Father, Mother God chooses the very special moment in history for each soul to return to earth, to take part in the divine plan of the decades and the centuries. When we abort life in the womb, we are aborting the opportunity of a soul whose timetable has come to be on earth at that precise astrological moment. The timetables of the conception and birth of every child are directed by Almighty God, by the archangels and cosmic beings of light, and the specific ascended masters who are the sponsors of that soul, the godparents, if you will. These timetables are part of God's grand design of life. Think how wondrously you were made, how God cared for you personally, how your own father, mother ordained your conception, your parents, your life, your purpose, your reason for being, carefully oversaw the nurturing of you in the womb, and you were born at that precise moment. No one is an unwanted child. Though parents may think they don't want the child, it is the true godparents who have wanted you and ordained you. Therefore I say to all, be healed of the burden that you may have been the unwanted child. For your Father, Mother God loved you in the beginning, has loved you through the burdens of such associations, and will love you all the way through to your victory home to his heart. Not one birth has ever taken place upon this planet that was not sanctioned by Almighty God and the Holy Spirit. No matter how hard you may try to conceive a child, unless it is the will of God and the timing of God, that child will not be conceived. The moment of conception is the moment of the ordaining of life by the Holy Spirit. Even before a child is conceived in the womb, the divine plan of a soul has been worked out in intricate detail. The grand design of God is so exact that at the moment of conception, the genes in that tiny embryo are already suited to the specific soul who will inhabit it. Before conception ever takes place, a board of spiritual overseers, called the Karmic Board, together with the Holy Christ self of the soul, determines when and where and under what circumstances the soul will embody. These circumstances are tailored to the soul's needs in order to give her the best opportunity to work out her karma. The law of karma is inseparable from life upon earth. It implies reincarnation, even as reincarnation implies karma. Karma, the karma each of us carries with us, contains positive and negative momentums. Momentums we have set in motion by our free will, by actions, by words, by deeds, by thoughts, by feelings, as well as by sins of omission, inaction, not speaking out when we should, not taking action, but simply sitting back and being an observer, taking life as a spectator sport. Karma is reaping what we have sown yesterday, 5 minutes ago, and 10,000 years ago. As God has ordained the cycles and laws of his universe, it works out that many of us do not reap in a given lifetime what we have sown in that life. We don't know if it will take 1,000 or 12,000 years for that energy, those actions, to come full circle to demand that we make them right. But God knows, and his law is unerring and unfailing and always just. And therefore, if we do the tasks of the day perform the services, and take our responsibilities each day of our life, doing all we can do to help others, as well as to inject into the society gifts we can give, something we can offer of our creation, from our profession, from our learning. That is sowing good karma as well as balancing bad karma. Free will, therefore, cannot be absolute or omnipotent, because in the exercise of free will, we have ordained what must come next in our life, whether blessing or bane, according to how we have sown. You would have to not be an observer of life at all to have failed to have seen that this law of karma is always acting in your life. So, as it is written in the New Testament, God is not mocked. This means that his law of karma will never be mocked. Paul also said that none shall escape. They shall not escape their karma. They shall not escape the law. God will not be mocked. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. Because we wind up at the conclusion of a lifetime with many debts and the desire to pay them, God gives us, in his mercy, the opportunity to return and to make things right. This is a far better solution than Orthodox Christianity, which tells us heaven or hell are the only choices. Most of us are ready for neither and desire to finish up the Lord's business here on earth. Jesus had that great desiring. He said, I must work the works of him that sent me. The Father worketh hitherto, and I work. We sense ourselves as the extensions of God. The body of Israel in Jewish teaching is the extension of the action of the Divine Mother on earth. We must be about the business of our Father, Mother God, and we must fulfill our divine plan. This is the inner sense of karma, and beyond karma, the fiery destiny of the soul, the desire to fulfill our reason for being. Every soul who is prepared to come into life is charged with that sense of going back to pick up the drop stitches, finish up that business, and set our house in order, and then give the world something of ourselves, that great creative gift, that gift of love and sweetness, of kindness, or some great monument of achievement. And so before conception, the parents of every child, whether they are aware of it or not, in their outer consciousness, have agreed at inner levels to receive that soul. If they have not agreed, they have been made aware that it is their karma to have that soul. Sometimes parents, seeing that this is a responsibility they must carry out, do not agree to sponsor the child because they are not willing to submit to the law of God. Often this is because their teachers, pastors, ministers, and rabbis have been wanting in the great knowledge of these cycles of life and have not been able to teach them, have not taught them that if they do not fulfill the calling to their life now, that they will be in a sense aborting their life plan and its cycles. So in resisting that assignment, even though they may need to have that child, they both have karma with him or with her. They place themselves in a more difficult karma-making circumstance because sometime, somewhere, they will yet have to bear that child. When two people block their opportunity to balance karma by aborting a child they have conceived, they will find that they cannot go on with their own divine plan. And it is very difficult to come to the place once again where two individuals will be together and that soul will be available and blessed by God to take embodiment. So it is not only the child's opportunity for life and spiritual growth that they are denying, but it is their own soul's divine plan and opportunity for life and spiritual growth that they are denying. A denial of life on the one hand does return as karma, the denial of life on the other. We lose something when we abort life in any way or circumstance, even if it is to crush another with words or with unkindness or meanness. I remember many years ago visiting my next-door neighbor. We'd grown up together, known each other all our lives. She was married, doing very well financially. She and her husband had had 4 boys. And the husband was in the process of making the decision to be sterilized. I saw a beautiful girl, a child who was to be born through them in their auras. As I visited with them, I suggested very strongly that if they would have just one more child, they would have a girl and complete their family. They were adamant and were not to be convinced. He was sterilized, and they did not bring forth that child that they should have brought forth in this life. Interestingly enough, they both came from very large families. So I looked at this beautiful little girl some months later, and I realized that she would not be born to them in their present life. And I saw the lines of karma whereby that couple would have to reincarnate again in order to give birth to that child. This is why, under certain lines of planning and birth control methods, it is wise to respect the opportunity that God gives us to bear children, and to rejoice in the opportunity of giving life to those from whom sometime, somewhere, we may have taken life. This is the great joy and purpose of marriage, of bringing forth children who can carry on in their mission, even as through them we are allowed to fulfill our mission. Children, of course, do not always represent karmic debts that we are paying off. But often, and more often, it is the case. Some parents who have already had children and have balanced the karma that they are intended to balance in this life through childbearing may then be chosen by God to bring forth children with whom they have no negative karma, but on whose behalf they are given the opportunity to bring them forth. And these may be highly gifted children who may make a great contribution to society by bringing back their past attainment with them. God has shown me that every child that is conceived has a divine plan and a divine design. Even if the do-gooders in society claim that the child is unwanted or handicapped and therefore should not be born into this world. The renowned pediatric surgeon and former U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. C. Everett Koop, says, "It has been my constant experience that disability and unhappiness do not necessarily go together. Some of the most unhappy children whom I have known have all of their physical and mental faculties. And on the other hand, some of the happiest youngsters have borne burdens which I myself would find very difficult to bear." Who are we to say that a life is not worthwhile? Only the soul herself can say. Helen Keller proved that life is worth living and fighting for. How can we ever forget the remarkable determination and the daring of the deaf, dumb, and blind girl who overcame the utter darkness of her childhood to become an exceptional author, educator, and lecturer? People who are born into abject poverty and the worst of circumstances often rise to become great leaders and prime movers of the destinies of nations. Look at President Abraham Lincoln, born to uneducated parents and raised in a log cabin in the backwoods of Kentucky. And the famous abolitionist leader Frederick Douglass, born and raised as a lowly Negro slave. And the American inventor and technological genius Thomas Edison. Did you know that he attended school for only 3 months of his life and was expelled by his schoolmaster as retarded. There is something higher than the body and higher than circumstance. It is the drive of the soul and the spirit that gives character and direction and impetus to an individual. We also have to remember that many people have serious karmas. They may have committed violent crimes in the past, child abuse, and so forth. Such individuals are required by the law of their own karma to embody in circumstances that are not ideal, because the purpose of karma is never to punish, but is to help us learn from our past mistakes. The only way we can learn from past mistakes is to go over them, to be in the same circumstance or a similar one where that is done to us that we have done to life. The hard knocks of life are sometimes what our souls need. The family and environment we are born into, and the friends, the foes, and the challenges we meet along life's way are all a part of the wondrous and intricate blueprint from the mind of God. This blueprint is given to us so that we can overcome all things through Christ, who strengthens us, and return home, a graduate of Earth's schoolroom in this life. God is teaching us through many ways, through experience, through karma. We cannot merely learn out of books. We are drawn from life, and to life we must go for some of our most essential lessons. Let us not resist those lessons or feel sorry for ourselves. Let us learn them well and become strong so we can help others. We find confirmation of these truths in the fascinating work of Dr. Helen Wambach. Her studies have given us a glimpse into the spiritual life of the unborn child, as well as the continuity of the soul. Dr. Wambach was a clinical psychologist and regression therapy expert who pioneered past life and prenatal research. She once said of her work, 90% of the people who come to me definitely flash on images from a past life. I am convinced that the time has come to study rigorously the plausibility of reincarnation. In one study, she asked 750 people under hypnosis questions about life before birth. She analyzed their answers in her book, Life Before Life. Although I believe that hypnosis can be dangerous under certain circumstances, and I do not recommend it as a tool in psychology, Dr. Wambach's findings are extremely interesting and worthy of study. For one thing, they reveal the soul's sense of the timetable of its mission. For example, many of her subjects knew they were born in the 20th century for a specific reason. Of those who answered yes to the question of whether or not they chose the 20th century to live their coming lifetime, the majority said they chose this time period because of its great potential for spiritual growth. You must understand that they chose to do what their counselors recommended that they do when they saw given to them and unfolded before them the karma of their previous lifetimes and the associations that they must meet again. 30% of her subjects knew they had to live during this time in order to be with certain people. Some stated that their purpose in this lifetime was to be with one or several other people they had known in past lives in order to work out their relationships. Others said they had come to fulfill a certain mission. Dr. Wambach observed that the largest group of the sample said that the purpose of this lifetime was to grow spiritually and to teach others. One of her subjects said, "Before my birth, there was a conference, and I had a feeling of deep love from one of my advisors. He talked of my learning to reach my life plan. When you asked about purpose, all I felt was a strong feeling of a plan." Her subjects agreed that others helped them in the process of choosing another lifetime. Of those who reported counselors before birth, 59% mentioned more than one counselor. We, of course, do have spiritual counselors who groom us for our soul's encounter with the challenge of our karma in our next life. Between embodiments and while in the womb, the soul is busy preparing for these challenges. She is being tutored at the soul level by spiritual beings on what is called the etheric plane. This plane of being is as real and concrete as the physical plane, but is experienced through the senses of the soul in a dimension and consciousness beyond physical awareness. The etheric plane is peopled by ascended masters, angels, and great beings of light. When souls of light are without a body between embodiments, they reside in this dimension of being. Here they are schooled in etheric retreats and universities of the ascended masters. While your physical body is in the sleep state, you also have the opportunity to travel in your finer bodies to the etheric plane to receive nightly lessons from your elder brothers and sisters, the ascended masters. You do not necessarily remember consciously these experiences, but they are real. Some people have glimpses of their experiences at inner levels through their soul memory or their dreams, when the door to realms of light, our real and eternal home, opens just a crack. Before coming into embodiment, each soul passes before the lords of karma to receive her karmic assignments for that life. These assignments are specific to each soul. They are carryovers from previous lives. We have many promises to keep and assignments to fulfill, and weeds to pull and flowers to plant. Dr. Wambach's study also reveals the sensitivity of the child in the womb. She reported that 86% of her subjects said they became aware of the feelings, emotions, and even thoughts of their mother before they were born. They were aware not only of their mother's feelings, but also of her interactions with their father. They could sense their mother's many different emotions, from fear and anger to peace and well-being. I myself had a recall of a previous life, and I recalled my experience in the womb before birth. I was being born through a very dominating mother who happened to be of a royal house of Europe, who totally dominated my father and put him down and did not give him his rightful place in the court. I grew to have contempt for this mother for the way she treated my father while I was in her womb. This was an amazing recall for me because it formed my attitudes toward my parents in that life. There is no question that the child in the womb knows his mother, hears every word she says, and can become comforted or frightened by what he hears and senses. I was reminded of this in a tragic way when a woman once called me in my office for counseling. She said that one day during her pregnancy she had become very angry with her husband. She flew into an intense and prolonged rage. She called to tell me that the next day she had had a miscarriage, and that she knew deep within her soul that she had caused the miscarriage by her rage. The child had elected either not to be born through them, or the energy was so intense that it actually killed the fetus. One of the most interesting conclusions of Dr. Wambach's research is that some of her subjects who were adopted children said they knew before they were born that they were going to be adopted. Dr. Wambach says some of them knew before they were born of the relationship they would have with the adoptive parents, and felt that they would not be able to come to them as their own genetic child, but chose the method of adoption as a way to reach their parents. She concluded from her research that chance and accident apparently played no part in adoption. This puts a new light on the attitude among many people today that if you are pregnant and don't want to keep your child, you might as well abort it. Your karma may necessitate that you bear a certain child so he can get to his own real parents who are not able to have children. And if it is not your karma, it is a service that you can perform for life, at the same time not making the negative karma of aborting a soul and a divine plan as well as a body. This is why we need to counsel young women and young men as well, who are fathers and mothers who are expecting, who may not want their children because they are unmarried. They may not want to carry them to term. We must encourage them to do so, to love and care for these mothers, especially when they are unwed. Teach them how to love their babies in the womb. Tell them the story of the life of the soul and the body in the womb. And then to give up their child for adoption if they have to, so that their child can be in their rightful karmic place and pursue their divine plan, and so that they will make good karma by carrying that child rather than negative karma in aborting it. All of us have a date, so to speak, with our karma. If we miss that date, then we miss our opportunity to pay off old debts that are owing certain individuals. And if we miss our cycle of opportunity, we may not get it again for a long, long time. Since the 1973 United States Supreme Court decision in Roe v. Wade legalizing abortion, over 25 million children have been aborted in the United States. These missing persons will not take their place as adults in the world scheme in the final decade of the 20th century, nor will those who might have been their offspring. The absence of these life streams in embodiment in this hour has compromised the divine plan for Earth. The consequences for all of us are serious. 25 million individuals did not contribute what God intended them to contribute to life on Earth in the decades of the 70s and the 80s. They did not grow up and marry and give life to other souls who were intended to learn from them, to be sponsored by them as their parents and teachers. Do you think that God only thinks of you when you are born? He is already thinking whose great-great-grandmother and great-great-grandfather you're going to be when you are yet in the womb. The plan of the mind of God is vast, a cosmic computer that none of us can even begin to comprehend. By playing God in aborting life, we are interfering with our evolutionary chain of life begetting life, life depending on life, helpless life depending upon those who are the strong. And with all the talk about the ecology of the planet, we should be concerned about the ecology of souls on the planet. There is a chemistry of certain souls who are meant to live together, evolve together, and experience life together. And they have a collective unconscious, and they respond together to the advancements of their time. Furthermore, the whole human race has a gene pool, and those genes are carefully calculated by God to be available for the incarnation of specific souls who have a specific mission, special souls like you and me and all who inhabit planet Earth today. All of us are special in the eyes of our Father, Mother, God. What some call the population explosion of the 20th century was ordained by God and sponsored by our teachers of the Aquarian age, Saint Germain and his twin flame Portia, for karmic reasons. Billions of souls need to be in embodiment together as we move from the Piscean age to the Aquarian age. For we are reaping karma, not only of the Piscean age, but also of 25,800 years. 25,800 years is a cycle of 12 ages. Astrologically, it represents the time it takes the equinoxes to precess through one complete cycle of the zodiac. souls who should be accelerating in the winds of Aquarius and the violet flame of the Holy Spirit, souls who should be ushering in the Aquarian age, are simply not here. They are waiting in the wings when they should be star players on the stage of life. Those who should be in leadership roles in education, in the war on crime and drugs, are simply not here. They are not where they are supposed to be, leading America to the pinnacle of a golden age in the 20th and 21st centuries. O God, deliver us from the death rider. We are not going to right the wrong of abortion unless we act today to reverse the tide of the slaughter of the innocents. I call upon 25 million American couples to each have an extra 1 or 2 babies that you weren't planning on, to atone for the sins of our nation before it is too late. Yes, America, inconvenience yourself, for the trek upward is worth the inconvenience. We should all be on our knees before Almighty God, offering prayers of sacrifice as penance for the sins of the many. Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. Call upon the Lord to give you the opportunity to bring in souls who are key to the turning of worlds and to our civilization's fulfillment of our reason for being. America, we have to get these 25 million souls we have aborted into embodiment as fast as our legs can carry us. The stages of fetal development. Advances in technology now enable us to look directly into the womb. We can see what human life looks like in its earliest hours, days, and months. The time of possible conception by the female is limited to 1 day a month. Woman has 2 ovaries and 2 fallopian tubes. Each fallopian tube connects one of the ovaries to the uterus. The ovaries alternate in producing an egg. Each ovary produces 1 egg every other month. Each month an egg or ovum enters one of the fallopian tubes. It has between 10 and 24 hours for fertilization to occur. If it is not fertilized in that time, it will disintegrate and be shed with the lining of the uterus in the next menstruation. The ovum is about 90,000 times larger than a sperm cell. About 250 million sperms start the race from the vagina to the uterus. They swim upstream almost in formation towards the waiting egg at a rate of about 3 inches an hour. It will thus take 2 hours to swim between 6 and 7 inches, the distance from the vagina to the egg. Of the hundreds of millions of entrants in this race, only about 100 reach the ovum. After reaching the ovum, the remaining sperms strive to penetrate the egg. As soon as one is proclaimed the winner, a change in the chemical composition of the outer wall of the ovum causes it to shut tight, preventing any other contestants from entering. The first week of life. The sperm cell that has entered the ovum combines its nucleus with that of the ovum to become a single cell. The uniting of the 2 nuclei is the moment of conception. The resulting single nucleus contains 46 chromosomes, 23 chromosomes from each parent. These chromosomes contain the genes that are the complete biological blueprint for a new individual. About 12 hours after the union of the nuclei, the new cell begins to divide and multiply. In about another 12 hours, the 2 cells will divide again and then again. They have begun a sequence that will culminate in a fetus that contains millions upon millions of cells. As it continues to divide, the ovum starts the 4-day journey down the fallopian tube towards the uterus. The 3-day-old cell cluster is called a morula, which is Latin for mulberry. By the 4th day, the cells will have increased to more than 100 and formed into a hollow ball called a blastocyst. The word blastocyst comes from the Greek blastos, meaning sprout, and cyst, meaning pouch. A sprout pouch. The blastocyst implants itself in the wall of the uterus about 7 to 9 days after conception. The mother's body doesn't even know that this new life exists. The embryo has to tell the mother that it exists by producing a hormone. This hormone tells the ovaries to make another hormone, progesterone. The progesterone warns the pituitary gland that the mother is now pregnant and should stop the shedding of the uterine lining in menstruation. A tiny embryo that is much smaller than an apple seed is now directing the mother's body. Since the embryo is genetically different from the mother's immune system marshals to destroy it. But the embryo releases other chemicals which act to turn off the mother's immune system within the uterus. In the 2nd week of life, the cells are beginning to differentiate to perform specialized tasks. One group of cells becomes the amnion, a protective sac that will keep the embryo in a fluid environment. Another becomes the yolk sac, which will produce the blood cells needed by the developing embryo. A portion of the yolk sac will form the gut. A 3rd group of cells will form the placenta. The placenta brings the baby's blood into contact with the mother's bloodstream so that it can receive oxygen and food and dispose of waste products. The umbilical cord, made up of 2 arteries and 1 vein, connects the embryo to the placenta. The mother may now sense that she is pregnant and experience some morning sickness. The 3rd week of life marks the beginning of the formation of the nervous system. The embryo is now growing so rapidly that it doubles in size almost daily. It also changes shape dramatically from round to elongated. There is a deep groove along the length of the embryo. The groove folds into a tube that will house the spinal cord, and then the top of the tube enlarges to become the brain. The nervous system is the first of the body systems to develop. It will influence the growth of all the other organs in the future development of the fetus. By the 18th day after fertilization, a tiny primitive heart has formed. Between the 18th and the 25th day, the heart will begin to beat, later increasing in frequency to up to 100,000 times each day. At the time the heart begins beating, the mother is not even sure she is pregnant. The baby's heart beats much faster than its mother's. It beats approximately 140 times per minute. The average adult heartbeat is 70 times per minute. In the 1980s, ultrasound enabled us to see live footage of an embryo as early as the 4th week. At the same time as the heart and the nervous system are forming, cells deep within the embryo are also differentiating into muscles, blood vessels, bones, and organs. A simple liver is forming, along with the start of the intestinal tract and kidneys. In the 4th week of life, the embryo is 1/5 of an inch long, yet that is 10,000 times larger than the fertilized egg. By 5 weeks, it will reach 1/3 of an inch. During the 4th week, the mouth and body cavity develop. Early eyes begin to form along with the other sense organs, the nose and ears. Tiny limb buds sprout. The head and neck make up half of the total size of the embryo. A small tail reaches its maximum length. It will disappear in the following week. In the 5th week, we see an embryo at 5 weeks on this slide. During the 5th week, the head straightens up, the eye sockets darken as pigment is produced around the 35th day. The differentiation of the brain has advanced to the extent that the cerebral cortex is clearly visible. At approximately 40 days, brain waves can be detected and recorded. The fetus can move, although the mother cannot feel the movement. This is a slide of a 6-week fetus. During the 6th week of life, the arms and legs continue to take shape. The hands become web-like. A lens, a cornea, and iris develop in each eye. The heart shows through the chest and is red in color. The liver is beginning to take over the function of producing blood cells from the yolk sac. The brain is easily visible since the bones have not yet formed in the skull. Facial features begin to develop. In the 7th week of life, the embryo is recognizably human. Eyes, ears, nose, lips, and tongue are formed. At this time, more than 100,000 new nerve cells are created every minute. The embryo is completing the formation of all 40 muscle sets, which will enable it to move spontaneously. In the completed skeleton, bone begins to replace cartilage. The jaw forms. Buds of milk teeth are nested in the gums. At 8 weeks, the embryo has grown to 1 inch or more in length. He now looks like a tiny person. He weighs about 1/30th of an ounce. All the internal organs are formed. The future developments until birth will be those of size and perfection of detail. At 2 months of life, your baby has all that he will have for the rest of his life. Think how important your diet is, your spiritual life, your attitude, the harmony of your being. All of this has affected the foundations of your baby. His matrix, his design is sealed at 8 weeks. Now the embryo is called a fetus, which is Latin for young one or offspring. At 2 months, the fetus can move his arms and legs and swim in his watery world. Some little ones have been recorded turning complete flips in less than 2 seconds. There are 1.6 million abortions performed annually in America. 51% of them are performed before the 8th week. That's 816,000 abortions before the 8th week. Now we see the 3rd month of life, 9 to 12 weeks. This is a slide of a 12-week fetus. During the 3rd month of life, the fetus will grow to a length of 2 to 3 inches and a weight of about an ounce. The womb has now doubled in size, and the tiny child uses it for vigorous activity. Dr. Roberts Rue, an experimental embryologist, writes, "Now when the brain signals, the muscles respond, and the fetus begins to kick, turn its feet, and curl its toes. Its delicate arm bends at the wrist and elbow, and its tiny hand forms a fist. The massive head atop the puny body pivots slightly on its stumpy neck. The face with its sealed shut eyes squints, frowns, purses its lips, and opens its mouth. The fetus has begun to breathe the amniotic fluid in order to exercise its respiratory system. He also drinks the amniotic fluid and begins to urinate. His eyelids have now fused together to protect the eyes. They will open again at the 7th month. The fetus alternately sleeps and wakes. His whole body is sensitive to touch. He has 10 fingers and toes, and his own unique set of fingerprints. This slide shows the feet and toes of a 10-week-old fetus. If his palm is touched, he will make a tight fist. He exhibits reflex responses to outside stimuli. And so, the wonder of life begetting life is before our very eyes. Today, there is considerable debate in the scientific community as to when the fetus begins to feel pain. Pro-life literature states that the fetus feels pain by the 8th week of gestation. Sensory receptors develop on the skin beginning at the 7th week. But the neural connections between the pain receptors and the neocortex in the brain are not established until 20 to 24 weeks or 5 to 6 months. Dr. Watson Bowes, professor of maternal and fetal medicine at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, says, "It's hard to either prove or disprove whether a fetus can feel pain at 8 weeks. But there may be a lot that science doesn't know," Bowes says. "A fetus at 12 weeks does a lot of things. It looks like they play in utero. As you watch a fetus in utero with ultrasound, you get an impression that it's a much more sophisticated and highly complicated individual than we used to think. We used to think there was a blob lying there." We have now reached the end of the first 3 months of the baby's life. The baby can touch its thumb to its forefinger, a characteristic that separates primates from all other animals. It has taste buds and will alter the rate of its swallowing if the amniotic fluid is sweetened. As Dr. Rue writes, by the end of the first trimester, the fetus has developed all of its major systems and is virtually a functioning organism. Almost, but not quite, for it is still unable to survive independently of the mother's womb. During the next trimester, no new organs begin to form. Rather, the ones that have already been laid down become more and more like what they will be in the newborn infant. 40% of the babies aborted annually in America are aborted between 9 and 12 weeks. That's 640,000 babies. Now we look at the fourth month. A 16-week fetus is shown on the slide. The fourth month is a time of rapid growth. The fetus will reach 8 to 10 inches, 1/2 the height he will have at birth. By the end of the month, he will weigh 1/2 pound or more. Enormous amounts of nourishment are being delivered by the placenta and the umbilical cord. The umbilical cord is transporting 300 quarts of fluid a day. The ears begin to function at this time, and the vocal cords are fully developed. When we see the wonder and the intricacy of life at this age, 16 and 17 weeks, we have to remember that 5% of abortions, or 80,000 children per year, are aborted between the 13th and the 15th weeks. Now you see just how much personhood, how much integration the soul has with that child. That child is making free will movements, decisions to move, to suck his thumb, and the characteristics of his personality are clearly present. During the 5th month, the mother definitely feels her baby moving about. She may even be able to identify an elbow, a foot, or the head poking against the abdominal wall. Loud noises may cause the baby to jump or kick energetically. The baby goes through periods of sleep and wakefulness. The mother can even wake him up by tapping on her abdomen. Fingernails and toenails form in the 5th month. The baby's entire body is covered with a white ointment called vernix, Latin for varnish, which protects his skin from the fetal waters. 48,000 abortions are performed each year in the United States on babies between 16 and 20 weeks of age, right up through the 5th month. By the end of the 6th month, the baby will be between 12 and 14 inches long. He will weigh about